Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Hello, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm so happy you're here because today we have an incredible conversation with my guest, Tonya Ridings, where we're exploring the balance between personal growth, spiritual connection, as well as psychological well-being. Tonya is a therapist who specializes in trauma treatment with a unique spiritual focus. She's bringing her years of experience in working with individuals recovering from various forms of psychological manipulation in high-control environments. In our conversation today, we are going to dive into the often subtle and unexpected signs that you might be involved in a cult or a high-controlled group. What makes today's conversation particularly fascinating for me is that Tonya reveals how these dynamics can emerge even when the leaders themselves don't recognize what's happening. We're going to explore how certain organizational structures, communication patterns, group dynamics, all kinds of different environments can sometimes unintentionally create the perfect conditions for cult-like behaviors to flourish. Tonya shares her insights on how these environments can impact our sense of identity, autonomy, and our ability to connect truly with ourselves and also with others. We're going to look at what kind of patterns in our lives could lead us maybe even more naturally into certain groups or circumstances where things become a little cult adjacent, if not truly cultish. So whether you've experienced these dynamics personally, or you know someone who has, or maybe you're just curious about the psychology behind high-controlled groups, or maybe you have a tingling, nagging suspicion that you might be in a high-controlled group or on the margins of one, this conversation is going to be vital for you. It's going to help you learn how to maintain healthy boundaries while pursuing your own spiritual growth, and also how to not get sucked in deeper and deeper to the behaviors that create high-controlled group conditions. So I'm thrilled about this conversation and really excited to share it with you. And so let's just jump right in. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm so happy to be here. I have my co-host with me today, Russell
Case.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
You took my last name recently, but you still call yourself Harmony Slater?
Yes.
But on your license, it says Harmony Case.
Yeah, but on my passport, it says Harmony Slater, so I'm only 1 foot in.
You had trouble at the airport.
Yeah, 1 foot in, one foot out.
1 foot in, 1 foot out. Yeah. Well, that's our relationship in a nutshell, Tonya. How are you doing?
Put my couple therapist hat on here.
There we go. Let's get into it. Yeah.
So today we're meeting with our very special guest, and we're so excited for this interview, this conversation, because Tonya Ridings has been helping folks heal for over 35 years now, helping them with trauma, particularly religious trauma, developmental trauma, and is a somatic psychotherapist. Also a Kundalini yoga teacher. Imagine.
I got into my yoga cult thing because I had the trauma. That's what I was there for.
You had the childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And then you got into the yoga
cult.
Culture.
That's how trauma works. These things link to things. And so when you're doing the trauma healing, you're tracing back as far back as you can remember. When's the very first time you remember feeling like this?
Oh, the pain and terror?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I could tell you. Oh, is that not
This isn't your
that's not
therapy
what we're doing
session,
here?
Russell.
No, but in a
Uh,
nutshell, that's part of the trauma healing.
One of the things that I say to people, and I think this might be an interesting construction for you, is that when I came to yoga, the posture that I was most comfortable with was like a small child hiding in a toy box. That was my favorite place to be as a child. Sometimes they find me in the closet, and people say that you're still in the closet. It's fine. But when going to yoga, like you practice like this opening, like all these pranic openings, you practice this prana moving, and I was terrified of that. And so like, that's the construction, right? That's what they sold me, is that they were going to help me with this childhood trauma. Nobody actually said this out loud, but they're going to help me with this childhood trauma with a immersion therapy of
Somatic therapy.
Yes,
Of
I'm going
doing
to
the
call it
opposite.
immersion, doing
Okay.
the opposite. Yeah, it was somatic, but we're going to just gently touch into the opposite. And sometimes we're going to yank you in, and you're going to cry, and you're going to need a hug and a pat on the bum. So does that sound like a dangerous proposition?
Yeah, because part of what you're talking about reflects back to the beginning of encounter groups, right? Back in the 70s when they were doing scream therapy and I don't know if you watched the documentary Wild Wild West about OSHA,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
being in these rooms with people emoting but no containers. Now we know about bringing resource on board first and building containers so you're not dealing with the whole path of what happened to you all at once. You're taking a few pieces at a time with your adult on board, right? Yourself. And then extending that help to these child parts. So I think it's always a suspicious proposition if anybody says to you, I have your answer.
Yeah.
Your healthy skeptics should come on board.
Yeah, I'm so curious about this connection that you made because we always felt like that going to Mysore, India to practice with our teachers there, Sri K. Patabi Joyce and later our Sharat Joyce. But that, especially in the early days when it was a little bit harder to go to India and yoga wasn't also such a
Pervasive.
mass-marketed kind of commodity, it was a little bit more weird and strange and different, that the people that we were with, we really felt like, oh, there are people. They're all adult children of alcoholics. They've all,
Punk.
yeah, this punk ethos is very, like, I've survived something sort of fabric to their essence.
And instead of doing drugs, right,
Yeah.
you're looking for a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, or they did the drugs and now they're
Right.
recovering addicts or reformed. And so it's curious because I feel like, you're touching in on this connection to the childhood trauma that often leads to the drug use or the alcohol use or this escape. And then we enter maybe something like you're saying that's a bit more of a healthier habit, a healthier culture where we're doing something with our body, our breath, and it seems like it's helping and healing. But are we ever doing the work to get to the root of what's creating this sort of addiction? Because people do get addicted to their yoga practices as well.
The question is it a spiritual bypass?
Yeah, I guess.
I think that if you're on any kind of a practice path and you're not willing to go into your own basement and look and see what's there with a light and with some good friends, with some guidance with you, then it could come under the heading of a spiritual bypass. But I also think there's a gradation of what we've known when. And so I don't know what year you were going to India, but maybe we didn't know that much about trauma yet. I got my master's in social work in 91. I don't think trauma was used.
No.
So it's a relatively new concept and conceptualization that we're looking at now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear.
I'm interested because I understood that you did Kundalini. One of the first yoga schools that I worked at was Yoga in Austin, Texas, which was run by big devotees of Yogi Bhajan and had a kind of center there. And it seemed like there was a kind of culture there for taking kids that were strung out on whatever pharmaceutical and bringing them to Kundalini and getting them involved in what looked like a highly controlled group.
Mm-hmm.
Like I looked at that and I really sympathized with it because I was doing the same thing. They let me do my little yoga asana program there, but I was on another track, but I was with this Ashtanga thing. It just felt like very parallel. Do you feel like that there are similarities, and do you agree that it was a highly controlled group that you were engaged with? Because I'm starting to feel like I was as well.
In my yoga teacher training, I did the training in 2012, and Yogi Bhajan died in 2004. So my teachers knew him, and certainly the teachers in the teacher training program, but I never met him. Now that, it's been a few years, and Pamela Dyson had written her book, and they did the whole Olive Branch investigation. What it looks like to me from a fairly outsider view is that the tight circle of people that were closest to Yogi Bhajan, including all those young female secretaries, the leadership at the Kundalini Research Institute and the 3HO organization, that was a highly controlled environment. You wore white, you wore a turban, you had a spiritual name. He told you who to marry. He asked you to send your kids to Indian boarding school. But there were lots of ashram and Kundalini yoga classes that were further removed from that center that, at least for me, didn't have that same controlling aspect.
Yeah, this is interesting because I kind of sense this even in the Ashtanga world, that if you're on the outside of sort of the Ashtanga circle in a way, like you practice Ashtanga yoga, but you've never been to Mysore, and then there's like a little bit closer, like maybe you've been a couple of times, but you're not an authorized teacher. And then there's even closer, okay, now you're authorized level 1 or level 2. And then there's like the inner circle, which is maybe certified, or people who have gone 10 years, 15 years, every year, closer to the teacher, closer to the apex of the sort of group head. And it's fascinating to see because, we were very close at the apex. We had a lot of interactions with the main teachers, whether not so much Patabi Joyce. We were a little bit further out with him, but
we fall into the close category.
Yeah, but with Sharat Joyce, definitely we were in the closer category. And so I think it's taken quite a while to unravel some of the feelings of, I don't know, just noticing how the manipulation happens, not necessarily from the top, but like within the circle itself.
From the sides.
Yeah, from the sides, exactly. If you don't take the same opinion as other people, you get shunned or people say mean things about you. And so there's a lot of fear and coercion and manipulation at a very subtle level, it seems to me. And I'm curious if this is common in these sort of religious circles or spiritual circles or in even cult dynamics.
Yeah, I think cult, or as you had put it, cult adjacent, it's not the leader who's doing most of the hurting, right?
Yeah.
The people are doing that. They've given up their own power and they're sort of policing themselves.
Yeah.
And so there's a purity culture. There's if it was an ascetic path, how much are you willing to give up for your practice? And honestly, sometimes the people who are in the groups with you can be much harsher than the teacher themselves.
Yep.
They can look kind and benevolent then.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah. And you and I had slightly different experiences. We talked about this once before a couple years ago, where my experience in Mysore were a lot of women hemming me in, telling me exactly what to do. And your experience was very different. And you didn't have this kind of feeling of women henpecking you on your normative behaviors.
Yeah, not so much. I
Yeah.
didn't have that experience so much, but I definitely felt that, that there's a lot of kind of pressure to behave in certain ways or do certain
Enormous
things. And if you want to
pressure.
do something differently, you really have to cultivate a lot of inner willpower and determination, and also be in a place where you're like, I might lose my friends at this point.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I was terrified at one point, very seriously, of getting out of a bad marriage because I felt like I would be shunned and I would lose my job, and I would lose my community, and I would lose the place where I was allowed to practice because I had seen someone face enormous pressure for breaking up.
mm,
And that kept me in a marriage I didn't belong in for 10 years.
So those are really strong societal controls, and whether they're written, spoken, or whether they're just in the water,
mhm,
they can still create an environment where it feels like you will lose everything if you leave.
mhm.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to stand against that.
Yeah, and then I'm curious because people I've heard say it's not a cult because you can leave anytime you want, but how much openness is there to actually leave if you're feeling so much subtle pressure that you're going to lose your identity if
And
you
you're not
step
allowed
away?
to question, right? You're
Yeah,
not allowed to express any
dissent.
skepticism.
Skepticism,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. There's overt control, but I think the covert control can be just as strong or stronger.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when we've given our heart to something and to a group of people, it's hard to imagine life without that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we should get down to brass tacks on this. And so, what are some of the identifiers of, I don't know if you want to use the word cult adjacent or cult or high control groups? How would the listeners at home know if they're in a dire or prickly situation?
Okay. So I wrote down some red flags, and you could use these red flags across all kinds of relationships, all
Yep.
kinds of different religious settings. One is if the guru's word is absolute
Mhm.
and unquestionable, right? Again, what we were just mentioning of no dissent, no
Yeah.
skepticism allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And is that like you can't really dissent with people in the community or to the teacher or partners?
If the teacher says
Mhm.
you need to only drink water before dawn, except on Sundays, then that's what you do. There's
Yeah,
Right.
that's
but my body wants orange juice or
Yeah.
any, because
yeah,
again, what happens is the group will end up policing these things.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, so we got a check mark there. Okay.
If
Mm.
you're asked to suppress your own critical thinking and questioning mind,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how it was for you guys in my store. I don't know if you were allowed to have vibrant discussions about what about this, what about that.
I don't know. Not so much. I think sometimes conversations happened on the side. People would dissent on the side. I'm just thinking around Patabi Joyce, people would say, oh, he's just like, why is there so much emphasis on the money? There was a lot of conversations around people describing dissent around that or questioning that, but it wasn't really encouraged. There's always an answer for it, too, also.
Yeah. With Yogi Bhajan, I know his followers would say he's a Saturn teacher. So he's here to confront. He's here to elevate, but he's going to do that through confronting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he got away with a lot just in how he
Yeah.
talks to people. I feel like watching his old videos.
Yeah. I've heard this also about Patabi Joyce. People have said this as well, that it's the Saturn teacher,
Wow.
the shadow teacher in a way, in that they confront they bring up all your
shadow teacher.
like
Yes,
they
I've
bring
heard
up
that.
all your insecurities and you're confronted with yourself in that way, which I mean, I guess in any relationship we act as a mirror for each other too. And I guess in a student-teacher relationship, especially one that feels very close or you've put the teacher very high, I'm sure all of your own insecurities or fears or different things are going to get magnified in that relationship.
You guys have been Ashtanga yoga teachers. You know that you'll get students in your classes who really want to know what you think about this and what you think about that. And you can feel that power dynamic. It's just part of the student-teacher. It is what it is there.
Yeah.
So to not be conscious of that or thoughtful of that.
Yeah, or to like get off on that power imbalance too and take advantage of it, or really be like, no, this is the correct way, and like not take away people's autonomy instead of giving autonomy. It's a very different dynamic that starts to develop.
People feed on that.
Yeah.
I would say 1 out of 2 conversations start with, Patabi Joyce told me this, Guruji told me this, and this is why you should do it. And in turn, when I was learning, I would hear what the Guruji would say, or I'd hear what Sharat would say, and I would say, we're supposed to do this. And then I would feel like a senior teacher would ridicule me for not doing that thing.
Mm.
On the rare occasion, there was a highly conscious individual peer who was saying, you have to be careful of guru-student relationships. You have to be careful of cult dynamics. And, here's a book on cults. There are people who are trying to be a kind of brave voice in the wilderness, but generally speaking, that was the dynamic. You'd hear the teacher say something, a senior teacher would back it up with ridicule if you didn't obey it, and then you in turn would go to your student and say, Sharat or Guruji said this, and this is why we do this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not going to do that, I need you to leave.
Wow, that's strong.
I've done that hundreds of times.
Hundreds.
Wow.
I've kicked hundreds of students out of my classroom.
Hundreds?
Hundreds.
And can you give me a for instance?
You're doing the standing postures backwards. This happened in Stanford once. You're doing the standing postures backwards. You need to jump to the right, not to the left. And if you're not going to do that, you can't practice here.
And so
that seems perfectly normal, right?
You're the through thread of the power. It's
Yeah.
coming from the guru through you into your teaching, into your students.
Yeah.
And when you decided to leave, what did you think about all that?
When I personally made my break,
Yeah.
He's still healing.
Yeah, I'm still healing. I would say that there was a sense of being broken, and then I broke. And because I broke, I wasn't going to achieve, and therefore, why bother? Is the kind of cycle. And then I started to have a kind of sense of contempt and disgust for people who were still trying and achieving.
And this may be something that you're on the path with, I think, vibrationally. So your ability to say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to make this break, and I'm going to take the consequences of what happens. That's going to vibrate to all the students you've ever touched. Right? That's going to have an impact on how they're living their lives and thinking about things.
Mm-hmm.
Because it works both ways.
That's beautiful, actually. In teaching a different way or in showing up as a different way. I mean, I still teach the Ashtanga yoga method and hold space and teach in the Mysore style and practice, as you do too sometimes.
Sometimes.
And
I get invitations sometimes.
yeah, sometimes you get invitations. But the way that I teach now is very different than the way that I taught 10, 15 years ago because of my own journey and different things that I've brought in through somatic coaching and emotional mastery work, and also just understanding trauma-informed spaces. And like all of that stuff I learned outside of the Ashtanga yoga culture, because it is not taught in that culture at all. And so all of that work I bring into the space that I hold. And I love what you're saying here, because it's not just those current students that are going to feel the effects of that change or that transformation. It's even students maybe that I taught 15 years ago that are also going to have the ripple vibration of those changes. So we can be a positive force for good or change or transformation, even without necessarily interacting directly with those students. So
That's what I believe.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm adopting your belief.
Great.
It's interesting, because when I go to these places now and I go and I teach, there's a weird thing that I endure or experience is I'm walking around and I'm seeing chaos, and there's an urgency inside of me to instill discipline in the way that I was taught, and I
Yeah.
really want to. And then I'm like, well, I'm different now. I'm the Russell that's okay with this environment.
Mhm.
But it's tough. And I'm just like, is what it is. It's not like the old days when I was traumatized and trapped in a structure.
Yeah.
And I wish I could do that for these poor people.
But then I think you get to decide, right? What is truly me that I'm bringing through for these students in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they're feeling the chaos, and maybe they would benefit from having some, smoothing down that energy.
Mhm.
And certainly you would benefit, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
You would feel better.
Mm-hmm. There's a balance, you're saying.
Yeah. The whole river.
Huh.
That's beautiful.
Huh.
So I think we got to 2. Do you have some more points for us?
Of course, any kind of exploitive behavior. So that could be money, that could be sex, that could be time, that could be sleep, no sleep, food, no food, anything along those lines.
Anything
just-
trying to control your mula bandha, your basic needs, your
That's right.
survival.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
Food, sleep, money, time, sex.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, like the when the teacher would tell us, don't do any marketing. You just go home and teach. And we would we're Americans. It was like, well, we really should be marketing ourselves. Like that's
Uh-huh.
important. We've, and then you would go home and not do that and try and be pure. And people that would put up advertising or do YouTube videos, we would oh, that's not pure. That's wrong. And our peers would say that to each other. I was one of the first people to do a YouTube video
Uh-huh.
of a posture, and all my friends came back to me and said, "We know that's wrong. I said, don't we?" And I said, "Yeah, we do. Yeah." But then you don't make any money at all. And so then you work for 9 months, you save up every single dime, and you go and give it to the teacher at the end of the year, all of it. And then you go home stone broke.
Yeah.
Are you saying that's problematic?
Exploited. Yeah.
Huh.
I think about there was so many when I was taught to teach Kundalini yoga, you have to teach it in this order, you have to use these kind of timings, you cannot switch the order of things, blah, 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 blah. And so when I'm teaching now, I call my Kundalini yoga inspired by the divine feminine, because I really want to separate myself from the trademarked Kundalini yoga by Yogi Bhajan. If I feel like, oh, we should inhale here instead of exhale, that feels right to me with this group, then I give myself permission not to hold in that form so tightly. But it does make you a little nervous at first. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to break this rule. I'm going to break that rule.
Yeah.
Are all my students going to disappear? Is my own flow going to go?
Mhm.
Scary. We've been indoctrinated.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing is when you have been indoctrinated or you realize you've been indoctrinated and then you're trying to make changes, these even small changes, like you're saying, changing an inhale versus an exhale, which seems pretty minor, but I think our listeners can relate to that.
Did get the shakes just now when you said that.
Because we also have a lot of rules around breathing and postures and things. And you realize that and you start questioning it or playing with it. And then you feel like a lot of shame comes up. I'm a bad person because I'm not following the rules anymore.
Yeah.
And that's very deep. And again, I think goes all the way back, like you're saying, to the childhood trauma that brought you to the practice in the first place.
Right. So then to find your wise, kind, compassionate adult self to look at this and go, oh, sweetie, this is okay.
Yeah.
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 We can think this through.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
okay if you didn't breathe the right way. You can
Right.
breathe any way you want.
That's right.
It's funny. I remember because both of us have gone through cycles of closer and further away. And it just reminds me that when in 2006, so I don't know, is that 20 years ago, 19 years ago?
Yeah.
I remember hearing that Harmony wasn't eating garlic or onions. And because garlic and onions it creates too much rajas in the system.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I was like, half of me was like,
They're not pure.
so contemptuous of her going the extra mile, and me having some self-disgust with how many onions I like to eat. I was like, I'm disgusted with myself, but Harmony's so pure. She's going so much deeper than I am. Is she going to get closer to the end than I am?
It's funny, though, because we're always placing ourselves on these hierarchies,
Yes,
too,
that's
right?
the point. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how our brains are wired. Who's
Mhm.
better, who's less than.
Yeah.
It takes learning and effort to not do that. To go, yes, and both, right?
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a habit that also is hard for people to break. It's hard for us to break that habit of placing ourselves in hierarchies or seeing other people get something or achieve something and then feeling like, well, why do they deserve to get that thing?
Because of the garlic.
I've been here longer, or I've done just the same amount. Why didn't I get that thing?
I was there before she was. Why didn't I?
and maybe this is also part of what you're speaking to in these sort of controlled groups or cult adjacent groups, where it's arbitrary who gets what. Like, it's all dependent on what the teacher wants and says, and there's no like criteria. It's not like you go to university and you pass these classes, you get a degree,
Standards.
and if you get 90%, you're going to get like an honors recognition, right?
Yeah.
There's like standards. It's clear.
But it is a lot like an abusive family.
Yes.
Where there's favorites and the favorites change and the rules could be important this day, but not this day.
Yeah.
And so you learn to be constantly scanning and trying to figure out what's the right thing to do today to keep everybody as regulated as possible. Keep the chaos down, right?
I feel so seen.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was funny. I saw it.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating too, because we have these things called moon days where you don't practice when the moon is full or when the moon is a new moon. And Patabi Joyce would like subtly shift them often so that he could go away for the weekend. So the full moon would be on a Thursday, but instead he'd shift it to a Friday.
Yeah.
So that he could get 2 days off, and we take. But also, no one said anything. There was always like some special reason why it was on the Friday and not the Thursday.
Yeah.
So you notice those little things, and because of the crowd control, the policing, lots of people might be thinking things, but it would be unfaithful or, you might get shunned if you bring it up. It's the same when we were talking earlier about people getting inappropriate adjustments during class.
Mm-hmm.
And why would you stay? Why wouldn't somebody come out of the pose and go, hey?
Yeah.
Because the senior teachers would come to us and say, you're an idiot. You're getting a special adjustment that's going to help you with your spiritual development. And at its root core, the Mula Bandha.
And who doesn't want that?
Everyone wants that. That's why we're here, is spiritual development. Like, I am an idiot. I wasn't being touched inappropriately on my perineum.
Right. There's a guy named Ken Wilber who wrote a book in 2007. You know him.
I know.
Yeah.
We don't know him personally.
Right. My first meditation teacher introduced me to him. And when she talked about his concept of you have to have spiritual development along with psychological development.
Yeah.
If you get one, you might have plenty of cities.
Yeah.
But you're sleeping with your followers.
Yeah.
So that just mind blown for me. I was like, oh, of course this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I've passed that along to tons of people because I think it really helps
Yeah.
understand that you may have all kinds of gifts, but if you don't have a psychological level of health,
Mhm.
you're going to hurt people.
Yeah. And I feel like this is so important because also it's something that I've noticed with a lot of Indian teachers as well, not to, call out India, but as Westerners, we're going to India for spiritual teachings and, awakening or practices. And India has a lot to offer. The philosophy, the somatic practices, all of it is, I'm so grateful and honor
Yeah.
their teachings so much. But in my experience with the teachers I've had who have been gurus, often I've had one guru that I would not apply this to who did his own work. Often they themselves have come from abusive situations and families and then have practiced really hard. And as you're saying, maybe had some of that vertical awakening and
Mhm.
spiritual enlightenment or achievement. But if you're not doing that healing work to really actually go in and understand what's driving you or what's motivating you
And integrate those parts inside yourself, right?
yeah, then like you're saying, it's almost like just this chain of trauma that gets passed down inadvertently, even if you're trying to be the best teacher you can be, because it's all unconscious, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Man, I remember somebody passing a paper around in New York in 2001, 2002, saying exactly that we're submitting ourselves to a cycle of violence. And everyone was talking about it, but we were all like doubling down on the practice and the violence part.
The last little thing on my list was if people cut ties with you, you choose not to conform.
Yeah, that one hurts.
Yeah, it really does. We're humans. We're herd animals. We want to be part of the group.
Yeah, that one really hurts. Yeah. And it happens. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are really afraid of that happening too. And so that, and like you say, that's why they don't speak out or they feel it, they can't speak their truth. And if they do speak their truth, they get that pushback. Why did you say this? You're just hurt. You're just lashing out.
Yeah. So when you guys left, how did you deal with that? You had each other, maybe?
Yeah, we
So
had
that
each
helped,
other.
having a partner.
Yeah. And it's not so much that we left, it's that we didn't go back. And because that's really the dynamic of our community is that you go and you get the Shakti pod, the
Infusion of energy from the teacher. Yeah, the Shakti pod, the transmission.
The love bombing.
The love bombing.
I looked this word up to ask you about love bombing.
Or the random abuse.
Random abuse, love bombing. You go and you take part in an idyllic Club Med vacation spa where you feel like an extraordinarily wealthy person for 8 to 12 weeks. And you feel rejuvenated and refreshed, and you've made all of these achievements, and you've had some abuse. And then you come home, and for 9 months, you're totally isolated from anybody. You go to bed at 6 p.m., you wake up at 2 a.m., you teach people who are your converts in your flock, and then you don't see anybody else.
Barely, yeah.
Barely, unless it's a private class, and then you go back to bed. And then we could pretend that we were just still doing that together, and then we started to fuck off and just, drink ourselves to sleep and wake up whenever the fuck we wanted to. And it's like, this is amazing. We're having a great time together. And then we just kept realizing like there were some things we really didn't like about that experience. And then we were asked last year to go to Charlottesville and take part in the Love Bomb. And we really looked at each other, and I really asked you, we should go, right? We've been invited. we should go to the Love Bomb in Charlottesville and do the active series training, right? We should do that. And you said, no. And thank God she did. I was like, and because I didn't need to get wrapped up in that again and spend $5,000 for a weekend. And
So what made you start pulling away, though? I'm curious what started the...
there's a lot.
I think what started the pulling away, I think initially it was the end of our marriages, because we were married to other people who were also in the group, who were also very much, enmeshed in the culture. And
as an aside, we were in those marriages because they were the opposite sex, they were vegetarian, and they did Ashtanga yoga in the Mysore style. That was the only reason.
Criteria to meet.
Tough criteria to meet. And those people met it, but there was a lot else that was left to be desired. A lot.
Yeah.
But we were in them because they met those criteria.
And like, he was explaining, it's a very particular kind of lifestyle that we were living in those relationships where we were both teaching full time and going to bed at 6, 7 p.m., waking up 2, 3 a.m. By noon or 2 p.m., you're exhausted. You're probably taking a nap. You're practicing hard. Then you're teaching. You're barely making any money, but you're doing your best.
There's a secret in-group that withholds sex and sperm, and they're really making great inroads. So, like, not having sex is really cool.
Yeah.
As well.
You'd only
Another
really...
aesthetic.
Yeah, it was really about asceticism, you know, and you're controlling your diet, you're controlling how often you have sex. You only have sex on Saturday mornings because that's your day off,
if your left nostril is open. That was said. That's serious. That someone actually said that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So I think when, like, for me, that kind of started a little bit of feeling like
divorce.
Yeah, the divorce. Like I might lose my friends here. I might lose people in the community. And so that initially kind of took me a little bit out, having to think about why would I even question staying in a place like where I personally wasn't happy, that wasn't feeding my soul, because I didn't want to disappoint a community that has nothing to do with my relationship.
Yeah.
And so it's...
So you each had an ending that sort of made you look at all the other things that were part of that.
Yeah. And then there was the Patabi Joyce
#MeToo
Me Too stuff that started coming out.
And his response to that left us
and
wanting.
then Sharat Joyce, he didn't really handle it that well. There was like a few little kind of like chinks in
he started
facade.
breaking away from Patabi Joyce's students and saying, I'm going to have my own students. That really hurt our feelings because we were right in the middle. I was like, well, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, so there was like a few things that happened all like one after the other that like was quite, it was like going through a loss of identity, I think, because
Sure, you're deconstructing.
Yeah.
I do a religious trauma group here in Charlottesville with a couple colleagues, and one of the last times we meet, we make the whole list of, okay, what do you want to let go of, right? And what do you want to keep? And you guys, I would imagine, are doing some of that deconstruction, reconstruction even now, right?
Yeah.
Even just by having this podcast
Absolutely.
because you're looking at, okay, what was good? What do we want to keep? What was really healthy, good for me?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such an important question, and really one that we came full circle around to is, what was it in the practice that really was beneficial for us?
For one, it was what we really liked was talking to different people and holding diverse viewpoints without judging them.
Yeah.
And that's what the podcast is for.
Yes.
It's like we talk to thousands of people about their practice and just listen. And we may be judgmental afterward.
Uh-oh.
No. I love Kundalini is great.
Yeah. It's funny. I have felt very relieved that the Netflix documentary, A Breath of Fire, has come out.
Yeah.
And I'm doing some research and writing myself because I want to have a little sheet of something I can hand to students. Because he did bring pieces from India that then he said, okay, this is this Raj yoga. This is this, people are going to try to kill me because I'm teaching this in America now.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe he channeled it. Maybe he made some of it up out of whole cloth.
Right.
Because beyond the sexual abuse, there's the fact that he may have made all this shit up. So then what do you do as a teacher, right?
That's a whole element of our community as well. Did he just make Ashtanga yoga up? We talk about that. It's a real, because it's like if you get tied into factual historicism of the practice, we don't really know that this is real, but
Very
there's so
nebulous.
much. But there's very much there's so much emphasis on parampara and learning teacher to student and obeying what your teacher tells you. But did you do that? Did you really learn these breaths connected to these postures this way, or did you just make it up? And did he just make it up today? Did he just make some change? Like, he made some change today, right? Like,
I'm gonna fuck with these people who are sitting in front of me wearing white, wearing turban. Let's see what I can get them to do.
Right.
You gotta wonder.
This really resonates because just like knowing, my teacher Patabi Joyce's personality, he has a little bit of like a trickster kind of personality, which it sounds like also Yogi Bhajan, had this similar element of just like, let's see what I can get away with. Let's see how they'll explain this one away, like really pushing those boundaries.
Aside from the kissing every female student, every single one, there was also like when he told Olaf to only eat ice cream for the next month.
Yeah.
And Olaf did it because Olaf was a believer and didn't have a sense of humor. He could have hurt himself.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. And who would do that? We would. We want that approval.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to belong. We want to be told what to do. If life was crazy growing up, here's some order.
Thank you.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, exactly.
So to really be kind to ourselves, too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is interesting how you seek that order, but also at the same time, it's, from what we were speaking about earlier, it sounds like also we're entering an environment, too, that is very familiar in that there's an element, a little bit of chaos, a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of danger, where you don't really know, like, am I in today? Am I out today? And that, to me, really, that mirrors growing up with an alcoholic parent. You're sort of like always scanning, like, where are we at? What's going on? What's, how's the environment? How's everyone feeling?
Right. So our nervous systems get wired that way. And even though it's not comfortable, it's familiar.
Yeah.
And we know how to act.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this also explains a lot of the, like you were saying, the questions about the adjustments, or we were in a class and some woman had a hip replacement and her hip went out doing a posture.
Her femur fell out of her pelvis.
Well, popped out. Yeah, it was terrible.
Okay, literally. Didn't just go out.
And then like the class just kept going. And she's like lying on her mat, kind of rolling around in pain.
Writhing in pain.
And everyone else is just like continuing the class. And the ambulance is coming. And, it
took some time. It's India.
In a way, you're like, well, we couldn't really do anything. But in another ways, I feel like that's not a normal response to this situation happening.
But is that human? Is it humane?
But
Yeah.
but in context, man, like you're there and it's like, well, we got to finish our practice.
Oh, yeah.
You got to keep the count going. Like it made sense.
Yeah.
Really made sense.
And the rest of the class.
Yeah.
Anyone on the outside of this circle that we're in is disgusted.
Yeah.
Like
We're
you all
confused.
didn't stop to help this lady. Carry her to the hospital would have been faster than waiting for the ambulance.
Or sit with her.
Or sit with her. Stop the class. You can't stop the class. We're right in the middle. Oh, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Wild.
It was an amazing day. I've seen it I had my friend Amberlyn, her arm went out of her socket in Encinitas, and we just kept going. And paramedics came. We were still practicing. We were not stopping. The paramedics walk in. It's like, you guys didn't stop for her.
Wow.
You just kept going.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really feel like I had an old boss that used to say your virtue is your vice. And so humans are amazingly adaptable
Yeah.
to our benefit, but sometimes not.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So how do you like start to untangle yourself? How do we start to untangle ourselves? If you're in a situation, I mean, our community just lost their guru again. Sri R. Sharat Joyce passed away in October.
He fell over dead.
And
Wow.
yeah, had a heart attack.
53.
And so a lot of people are feeling a little bit lost at sea and a little bit like looking. I think a lot are looking to someone or a group of people to take over and guide the flock and
How
other
to
people.
recreate these conditions that we're so comfortable with.
Yeah, recreate the conditions. Other people are maybe feeling like they need to break away. But in doing that, how do you untangle yourself without totally dismissing or disparaging a community or friends that you've had for decades, potentially?
For many of us, being embodied enough to know what we really want is a whole practice in and of itself. It takes time, even though, I mean, yogis are often athletes, right? And there's a form of dissociation that creates a very highly muscled, very athletic responding body that you're not in.
Yes. I'm so glad you said this because I also practice spinal energetics, and I've noticed this with Ashtanga yoga practitioners that come to me is there is a high degree of disassociation with their physical self.
Yes.
That's just called like enduring pain.
Yeah, well, I think that creates the condition.
Right. That's part of it, for sure.
We were taught that. We were taught to endure the pain.
So to learn to come into your body,
Yeah.
right? I can wiggle my toes. I can feel what my legs and feet feel like all the way in over and over again. And then to sit with the question of, do I want to get up at 2 a.m. or do I want to get up at 8 a.m.?
I want to get up at 8 a.m.
Yeah. So to know that from a physical, in your body place. And then if you're newly finding out what you actually want, you're going to ask that question of yourself over and over again.
Yeah.
You know, find people that you trust that either have left or are at least questioning. Make friends that are outside of that circle. Find a therapist or a coach who's going to support you in your efforts.
Yeah.
And allow yourself to feel what freedom, safe freedom, healthy freedom feels like.
Yeah. Yeah, and do a lot of that self-compassion work, I think, that you were alluding to, because we judge ourselves, right? Even if you make the decision, you're like, okay, I want to wake up at 8 a.m., and you wake up at 8 a.m., and then you're like, oh, I'm such a terrible person. I woke up at 8 a.m.
Yeah, that goes with it.
And this is, if you find somebody who does parts work, it can be so helpful.
Parts work?
Parts work. Like,
or the internal family systems work. Because there might be a part of me that wants ice cream every evening and another part of me that doesn't. And I need to be able to communicate with both of those parts.
Yeah.
And that builds integration. That builds that ability to be the adult the adult we need.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, I love this. I love this. Thank you so, so much. It's been so wonderful to connect with you.
Are we finished?
I
I
got the
really wanted to know more. Did we pronounce your name right? Tonya Ridings?
Tanya.
Tanya, yeah. I thought it
Yeah.
was Tanya. You said Tonya,
I
and I was
did?
not sure about that. Tonya Ridings.
Tanya
I wanted to
Ridings.
know a lot more about how you recreated the conditions of your childhood as an adult. But maybe we have to do that next
Therapy
time.
He wants to hear what drew you into therapy and Kundalini yoga.
Yes, I'd be happy to come back. This was really fun.
Oh,
Good,
cool.
beautiful. Well, we would love to have you back and talk more about this because it's one of our favorite subjects to talk
And it's
about.
so important.
Yeah.
Why do you have a comforter on your
So
table?
I do somatic psychotherapy. So some
Oh,
sessions, people are laying down,
okay.
fully clothed.
Yeah.
And I may
Yeah.
be holding onto their arm as we're working with skin and fascia, their kidney, their brainstem. It's a way to give the body a way to release the trauma.
And if
Love it.
someone wanted to do that, how would they get a hold of you?
Ideally, they would reach out through my website,
Okay.
TonyaRidings.com.
TonyaWritings.com.
I,
That's
we have
awesome.
to go to Virginia.
We do.
So
we have
That
a lot
would be
of
fun to meet you
there's a
guys
lot
in
of-
person.
there's a lot of draw to come to Charlottesville.
We're coming to visit, and I'm going to get on that table back
Yeah,
there.
we- Good.
That sounds
That'd be
great.
great.
Thank you so much for coming
You're
on
welcome.
today.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. And if you're ready to understand how you work best in the world, discover your spiritual entrepreneur archetype. I've created this most amazing quiz. It's free for you, and it's going to give you the key that unlocks your ability to attract your ideal clients and create a business that truly resonates with your soul. After taking the quiz, get ready to receive your Archetype Branding Inspiration Kit. It's going to help elevate your business and your branding to the next level. Maybe you're wondering, what is a spiritual entrepreneur? Well, a spiritual entrepreneur is someone who feels called to use their unique skills, talents, and knowledge to serve and uplift others. Sound familiar? I think it might be you. Typically, yoga teachers, healers, coaches are in the realm of the spiritual entrepreneur. You're living your dharma. You're walking a path and leading others towards their own path of personal growth and development. So, if you're ready to align your soul with your business goals and align your business with your true purpose so that you can attract more of the people that you're here on this planet to serve, then be sure to head on over to my Spiritual Entrepreneur Archetype Quiz. It is so much fun, and you are going to get so many little gems as a result of taking this quiz. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.